Well, today we're continuing our series that we began last week called With Everything, and the big idea that we saw last week is that every single person was created to love God with everything, that the singular goal for your life should be to love God with everything. Why? Because when Jesus was on this earth, he was asked by some religious leaders, what is the single greatest thing that I should give my life to? What should I focus on? What's the greatest commandment from the Old Testament for the Jewish people of the day? And he answered quite simply that the thing you should give your life to, the thing you should prioritize, the ultimate goal of your life should be to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, and your neighbor as yourself. To love God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, and neighbor as yourself. That includes pretty much everything. That we should love God with our emotions, with our mind, with our strength, with our behavior, with our soul spiritually, and the way we treat people, that we should love Him with all that we have and all that we are. That should be the goal of your life according to Jesus. Whether you're a follower of Jesus or even if you're not a follower of Jesus. If you're here today, you're watching online, you're like, I'm not sure what I believe. Like, that still is to be the goal of your life, because Jesus, if He's the creator, if He created you, then He knows what's best for your life. And that's what you should be about. And so, in light of all that, because that's true, and because we believe that that's what we're created for, I challenged us last week at the beginning of this series that we would pray every day throughout this series a simple prayer. And the prayer was simply this: today, I choose to love you with everything that I have. Help me to follow you closer than ever before. Today, God, I choose to love you with everything that I have. Help me to follow you closer than ever before. Because what we saw last week is true. We want to pray daily. If this is what we were created for, if this should be the singular goal of our life, then we should pray and ask God to help us. This is a prayer of dependence, and it's a prayer of desire. God, I want this because you know that this is what I should do, but God, I need you to help me. I'm dependent upon you. And it's not just enough to pray this, right? It's not just enough to believe that what I just said is true. Like, to love God with everything means that this prayer that we pray should move us to action, right? Because to love God is not just to give a Valentine to God. It's not just to feel warm feelings toward God, but to love God. Love is a verb. Love is action. To love God with all that you are and with all that you have means that you have come to the place where you've realized you're willing to live your life for Him. Meaning that you're going to allow your desire to move you to action. To love God with everything is to do what He says. To love God with everything is to obey Him. Which leads us to today. And which leads us to the real question that I want to ask today. What is it that's keeping you from loving Him with everything? What is it that's keeping you from living a with everything type of life for Jesus? Because if I were to ask you, I think you would say, again, if you've been following Jesus for any amount of time, or even if you're new and you're like, okay, I believe that I should, like, if you're not doing that, then what's keeping you from doing that? Like, where's the disconnect? If you know that you should, you know that that's what's best, but you're not, then there's obviously something keeping you. There's obviously something keeping me from loving Him with everything. We talked through some of the misconceptions of loving God with everything last week, like, oh, well, that's only for the super spiritual people, and it's not. It's to be for everything. Loving God with everything should become normal, not extraordinary, not for the isolated few, but it should become normal. So what's keeping us from doing it? What is it? If it's not that we don't intellectually understand, because we do understand. We understand what He's done for us. We saw that He's loved first. We understand that He knows best. Then what is it that's keeping us from loving Him with everything? I think it's that we're not willing to pay the cost. What's keeping you? What's keeping you watching at home right now from maybe loving God with everything? We aren't willing because it's going to cost us something. We say with our mouths and we believe with our hearts that we want to love Him with everything, but when we start to do it, we realize there's a cost, and at the end of the day, if you're not loving God with everything, might it be because you've realized there's a cost to loving God with everything, to doing what He says, and you're not willing to do that. Because make no mistake, following Jesus and living a with everything type of life for Him, loving Him with everything, will cost you something. Because the things He's going to lead you to do when you love Him with everything aren't cheap, aren't easy, aren't safe, and they're not convenient. So if we hold back when He calls us to do something by going all in, by loving Him with everything, then ultimately it means one thing. Not only aren't we willing to pay the cost, but we're not willing to pay the cost because we don't really think that Jesus is worth it. We're not willing to pay the cost because we don't believe that Jesus is worth the cost. How can I say that? Because every one of us pays the costs for things we think are worth it. We all do. We all pay the cost for things we think are worth it. Electricity and gas in the winter, it's expensive. Your bills are probably going up because it's been so cold, but guess what? You're paying for it. You know why? Because it's worth it, right? We pay for what we think it's worth. And I'm not just talking about necessities. We pay for things that we think are worth it, that don't make sense to other people, are a little bit extreme, and are even wants. All right? Things that aren't essentials. Think about this one thing. Think about skydiving. How many of you in the room have ever been skydiving? A couple. Wow, several people. All right, several of you have been skydiving. All right, a lot of people have been skydiving. I've never been skydiving. All right. But take skydiving for example. I think we got a picture on the screen that's going to come up. Yeah, there's the picture, right? Look at this picture. This is a picture of someone skydiving. And here's what I know, not because I've been skydiving, but because I've talked to other people who have been skydiving. This is not an experienced skydiver because they're jumping tandem, all right? There's somebody on this girl's back, all right? Why is there someone on this girl's back? Because if something goes wrong, if she freaks out and she hasn't jumped enough so that somebody will pull the cord, all right? So that the parachute will open and she'll be okay, all right? But here's what I also know about skydiving, is that this right here, this experience of jumping out of a perfectly good airplane, it's expensive. Like, it's not cheap to go skydiving. Several $100s last time I looked, all right? Like hundreds of dollars to go skydiving. It's not cheap. It's expensive. It costs you something. And oh yeah, you could literally die. So people pay a whole lot of money. There's a cost. For something that they could die from, there's a cost. You're jumping out of a good airplane. You have to sign a lot of liability waivers. There's a cost to that. But people still do it. Why? Because they believe the cost is worth it. And look at her face. I mean, it apparently is worth it. In this moment, you know what she's not thinking? I can't believe I paid that much money to jump out of an airplane. In this moment, she's like, this is what I had dreamed of. This is what I thought it could be. It's apparently an incredible experience. I'm just taking people's word for it, all right? I haven't done it. But look at the smile on her face. The cost, she believed, was worth it. What if this is a perfect picture of what it looks like to love God with everything? What if this is a perfect picture of what it's like and what it should be like with Jesus? Is there a cost? Absolutely. Is it terrifying at first? Yes. Could it cost you everything? Yes. But is it worth it? Oh my goodness. So worth it. Going all in with Jesus, loving him with everything so much that you're willing to pay whatever cost it is so much more worth it than jumping out of an airplane. It's so much more worth it than anything else. And getting to the point where you realize loving him with everything is worth me literally jumping and going all in, that's the point at which you will come to discover that it's what you were made for. And this morning, to help us chip away at what I believe is one of the biggest barriers to us going all in with Jesus, to you going all in with Jesus, loving him with everything, I just want to look at one passage of Scripture, one account in the life of Jesus of a woman who didn't jump out of an airplane, but a woman who gives us a picture of what it looks like to love Jesus with everything. A woman who gives us a picture of Jesus being worth it. It's found in Mark's gospel, one of the 4 biographical accounts of Jesus' life that's recorded for us and preserved in the Bible. Mark chapter 14, Jesus has come to visit Bethany, which is a town right outside of Jerusalem. Bethany was a town that he liked to visit. He went there a lot. He had a lot of friends there, and he comes to have dinner at a house, the house of a man named Simon, who is known as Simon the leper, which means that this man had a skin disease, and previously he had likely been healed, which is why he's going to the house of a man named Simon the leper, because if he really had leprosy at this time, he wouldn't be in the house, he would be in isolation. So this is a moniker, a title that he was known by in the community because he used to be a leper, and so they're having a dinner to honor Jesus. We don't know all the details why, maybe because Jesus had personally healed him. But while they're there at the dinner party, that involved a lot of people, Jesus, Simon, the disciples of Jesus, some friends. There's also a woman there that has come to follow Jesus, and she loves him more than anything else, and her name was Mary. And it's what Mary does, again, that I want us to see. I want you to keep in the back of your mind what keeps you from following Jesus all in? What keeps you from loving him with everything? Might it be that you don't think he's worth the cost? Let's look at a woman who believed that he was worth it. Verse 3 of Mark chapter 14, and here's what we read. That while he, that is Jesus, was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as he was reclining at the table, a woman with an alabaster flask came to him. And it was an alabaster flask of ointment of pure nard, very costly. And she broke the flask and poured it over his head. Now that seems kind of crazy, right? Like pouring ointment over someone's head? Like what on earth? Why does she pour perfume on Jesus? I mean, that's kind of weird, right? I mean, if I came into the house and someone pours this ointment on my head of perfume, all right, I'm going to probably sneeze, have an allergic reaction. Like, I don't know what's going on in this situation, okay? I'd feel like I have to shower. Like, this just ruined my clothes. It's just weird, right? And even if the president or someone famous, your favorite celebrity, came into your house and they were a person of honor, you wouldn't go up to them and throw ointment on them, would you? Because it's strange. We don't do that in our culture. But perfume or ointment had a different significance in this culture. The alabaster jar was made in such a way that when contents were put into it, it was sealed, and it could only be used if the neck of the jar was broken. And the nard was made from the root, all right, of a root of a plant in India, all right? That's where this perfume came from. And so you would only use this because it was expensive to import it. It was expensive, the root that this came from in India. It was like an essential oil. You would only use it for a specific purpose, like an offering in the first century, or to prepare a body for burial or for anointing purposes. You wouldn't just pour it out flippantly. So why would this woman named Mary pour out this jar of expensive perfume on Jesus. Something that's so precious, so valuable, something that was only supposed to be used for an important purpose, and this is just a dinner party. Like, why would this woman do this? Why would she do this? That's the question that Mark is leading you to ask as you read through this account. And this is the question that others were asking too. Look at verse 4. There were some that were there, of those who were present. They were saying indignantly to one another. And I want you to look at these words, all right? Why this waste of perfume? Why was this ointment or perfume wasted like that? Why this waste? Do you see that? Why this waste? I want you to remember those three words. They see this woman do that and they say, why this waste? And then they go on in verse 5. For this, it could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor. And at this, they rebuked her or scolded her harshly. But why this waste? That's the big question. Don't you see how expensive this perfume was, woman? Like what are you doing? A year's worth of money, tens of thousands of dollars in today's money just gone, poured out on his head. If you work a part-time job, for example, imagine saving up for a year so that you could buy something, all right? Maybe a car, and then just flushing it down the toilet instead of buying that thing. That's what the people, the disciples, and those that were around were looking at her and thinking, like, what are you doing? Why this waste? It seems so irresponsible. And who is it that's saying this? Remember, it's the disciples that are there with Jesus. And interestingly enough, John's account of this story and what happened, he tells us that it was Judas who was leading the way, saying, why this waste? We'll come back to that. But here's what I want us to see. They're asking, why this waste? Judas is saying, why this waste? It could have been given to the poor. Look at what Jesus says, verse 6. Jesus says, leave her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. She's done a beautiful thing to me. Verse 7. For you will always have the poor with you, and you can help them anytime that you want. But you will not always have me. Jesus isn't saying that he doesn't care about the poor. He clearly does. Look at the life he lived and what he taught. But this point is that this woman gets it. She realizes who he is and that he is in the room. Jesus is saying, hey, you're going to have other opportunities to take care of the poor, to serve the poor when I'm gone. But right now, she gets it. She understands that the most precious and valuable thing in the world is in front of her, and she's going to acknowledge that somehow, no matter the cost. No matter how much it costs her, she's going to show worth. And then I love this next line that Jesus says in verse 8. He says, she did what she could. She did what she could. My body beforehand, she has poured perfume on to prepare it for burial. So Jesus is saying, y'all don't even understand what she's just done. I'm getting ready to die soon, and she's preparing my body for burial. But it's that first phrase before he talks about anointing for burial. He says, she has done what she could. Meaning, what Mary did in this moment, according to Jesus, wasn't extravagant. It was appropriate. Jesus says she did what she could. Almost as if they're looking around saying, why this waste? Why did you waste it? And Jesus is saying, hold on, don't be mad at her. She did what she could. What she did was appropriate. She took the thing that was of most value to her and broke it and gave it to me to show that I am more valuable. What's happening is what Jesus said. She did a beautiful thing for him. What was that beautiful thing? She took what was most precious to her materially and gave it to him. It could have been all she had of value. Could have been her inheritance. Could have been her most precious thing. And she said, you know what? I know who it is that's in front of me. I'm going to do what only I can do. And I'm going to show the world that is here in this dinner party around me that I believe that Jesus is the most valuable and I just want to worship him. So she broke this jar of perfume and she just poured it on Jesus to show him that she loved him with everything. And she believed that he was worth the maximum cost that she could give to show that. And she was not worried about giving him leftovers. She wanted to go all in because he was that valuable. It would be like us in this room today if we truly got it and we truly understood the value of Jesus. That if he walked in the room, that as soon as he walked down, if he walked down this aisle right here, like the first thing that I would do is to get off a stage. Like get off the stage because it's Jesus in the room. Like I want to make sure that everybody knows that Jesus is the most valuable person in the room. Not me, not anybody. Like let's put Jesus on stage. And she understood that. And so she had this alabaster jar that was the most expensive, like a year's worth of wages. And she broke it and put it on him to show it. It would be like us just throwing things at Jesus to show value. It would be like if he came up here and me taking off my wedding ring, like this is really important to me, Jesus, but you can have my wedding ring and like my wallet. Hey, this is important. I got some, I don't know if I have any cash in there, but I've got some cards in there that I can charge things to. Okay, so you can have that. It'd be like me taking my keys and being like, hey, this is the keys to my car, to my house. Like you can have that, Jesus. Like you can have everything. And I just want to ascribe worth to you. I want you to realize how valuable you are. And I want you to know that I'm willing to pay whatever cost you ask me to, but I'm going to voluntarily pay the cost to remind myself of your value. Like that's what she did. And Jesus says that her doing that was a beautiful thing. Did she do that because she wanted to get something from Jesus? No. Did she do that because Jesus needed something from her? No. Jesus has everything. She only did that for one reason. And we should only respond that way for one reason, because we're so overwhelmed by who Jesus is and his value. In fact, that's what worship is. Worship is not simply singing songs. Singing songs and posturing your heart correctly towards God through song is a form of worship, but worship, like at its core, is seeing the value of Jesus and being willing to break, being willing to pay whatever cost it is that's in between you and him because you want his value to be made known in your life. Like that's worship. That's what this woman did. She went all in. But so often, we're not willing to do that. Why aren't we willing to do that? Because we don't truly believe that he's worth the cost. You know how you'll truly know if you value Jesus above all else? You know how you'll truly know if you love Jesus with everything? You know how you'll truly know if you're willing to pay the cost? There will be someone that will look at your life, and they may not say it out loud, but they'll think, why this waste? You know how you'll know if you're living a with everything type of life for Jesus and you love him with everything? It's if when someone looks at your life, they think, why this waste? Why are you wasting your life for this man that lived 2,000 years ago? Why are you reorienting your life to this man that lived 2,000 years ago? Like, why are you going to church? It's 2025. Who still believes that? Like, you'll know if you've ever lived a with everything type of life, because someone will think or say, why this waste? And if no one has ever said that to you, then either you have no friends around you who don't know Jesus, which is a conversation for another day, or you've just never really loved him with everything. Like, when you live a with everything type of life for Jesus, he will lead you to do things and you will be led to obey him in ways that will not make sense to people that do not value him. You'll have 3 weeks of vacation at work, and rather than maximizing that vacation, you'll take 1 week and go on a mission trip. And people will say, why would you do that? Man, you earn that time and you're going to give that to this Jesus and go serve other people? Like, what a waste. And you're like, no. I value Jesus more than anything else. You've saved up to do a remodel on your home, and you've been saving up because you want to expand, and you've been saving up and you got a raise, and it's like you had a plan for it, but Jesus redirects your heart to give something to the church, and people are like, what a waste. Why would you do that? And you're like, no, you don't understand. Like, I love Jesus more than anything, and if he asks me to do something, I'm going to do it because I value him. Not that doing any of these things is bad, but it's being willing to do something if he calls you to it. Like, all your friends are on social media, but you've realized that social media is taking you down some dark paths. And it's like, man, it's going to cost me if I don't know what everybody else is doing every waking hour of the day, and they don't know what I'm doing, so I feel like I'm... And it's like, but no, I'm going to do it. And they look at you and like, why are you wasting your life? Maybe you had college dreams, but God led you to change directions and go in a direction for a career that's not going to pay as much as you thought it was going to pay. And people are like, why would you waste your life on doing something? And it's like, no, because I value him more than anything else. You get a raise in your job, and the first thing you do is not, how can I spend this raise? But man, I'm so excited I can increase my standard of giving now. People are like, that's crazy. No. That's just what people do that love and value Jesus more than anything else. It's worth the cost. Your spouse gets a terminal diagnosis. And your friends are telling you, because it's been a long time, why don't you go get pleasure outside of marriage? That's what everybody else does. She would want that for you. And you're like, no, I'm going to be faithful to my wife to the end because that's what Jesus has called me to. And they're like, man, what a waste. Why would you do that? You're a single mom trying to make ends meet. Inflation has been hard. You're not making it on your teacher salary, and you hear about this thing called OnlyFans. Nobody's going to know. I can make a lot of money over here if I just do that. But then you say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to pay the cost. Why? Because Jesus is worth it, and I'm going to trust him with my finances and live with integrity and love him with everything, even my career choices. I don't know what it is for you specifically. I don't know what the cost is for you specifically. But it's daily waking up if you want to love him with everything and saying, Jesus, today I want to pour out my life for you. How can I live for you today and love you with everything, with all that I am and with all that I have? How can I love you with everything? Because I believe that you're worth the cost. Mary did that. Jesus said she did something beautiful to him. But look at what else he said in verse 9 about Mary. I want you to see this. He said, truly I tell you, wherever the gospel, the good news about Jesus, like what we're doing today, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done, will also be told in memory of her. And that's exactly what's happened, right? This story of what she did was included in Mark's gospel, which is included in the Bible, so that wherever the gospel is preached, wherever the message of Jesus is shared all around the world, guess what is shared right beside it? The story of Mary. Because we want to remember how great Mary was? No, that's not what Jesus was saying. Jesus was saying we'll remember Mary because when people go all in for Jesus, what they did is worth remembering. Not because of who they are, but because of the worth that they have ascribed to Jesus. A picture of someone willing to go all in is worth preserving because it challenges us. It calls us to something greater, something that we're willing to live for, the cost we're willing to pay. Mary did something beautiful in the sacrifice that she made, in the cost that she was willing to pay. She would be remembered forever. But remember, I told you we would come back to that phrase, why this waste? I told you it was Judas who was leading the way, asking, why this waste? Well, not only do we remember Mary, but we remember a man named Judas. The very next verse in this passage, right after we're told, this is crazy, right after we're told that Mary would be remembered, look at what Judas was doing. Verse 10, then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went to the chief priests, what? To betray Jesus to them. Verse 11. And they were delighted, that is the chief priest, they were delighted to hear this, and they promised to give him money. So he watched, that is Judas, he watched for an opportunity to hand him over. Do you see this? I really want us to see this, so lean in. The guy who said to Mary, what a waste. You could have given all that money to the poor. Betrays Jesus right after this event. Scripture tells us in another place, in another gospel account, that Judas betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. Get this, Mary was willing to give up a year's worth of wages to worship Jesus, while Judas was willing to give up Jesus for the equivalent of just a few months' wages. Do you see that? Judas said to Mary, what a waste. You wasted a year's worth of money to worship Jesus. But Judas gave up Jesus for 3 months' wages, 30 pieces of silver. We're told by Jesus that what Mary did was a beautiful thing, and we would remember her and her sacrifice. We're told later that Judas, after getting the money for betraying Jesus, immediately regrets it and goes out and kills himself. But here's what I want you to see. Judas didn't think Jesus was worth it. Judas didn't think going all in for Jesus was worth it. He thought it was a waste. And see, I'm afraid that too often, too many of us are like Judas. We come to church, we get near Jesus, we claim association with Jesus, but as soon as it gets hard, as soon as it's gonna cost you something, we pull away. We pull away. We pull away because the cost is too great. No, we pull away because we don't view Jesus as being worthy of it all. So instead of sacrificing whatever it is that stands between us and Jesus, we would rather sacrifice Jesus and go on with our life. But here's the truth. We will all either at the end of our life look back and be either Mary or Judas. We'll either waste our life in the world's eyes by going all in and paying the cost to follow Jesus and love him with everything like Mary, or we will waste our life by saying no to Jesus and being like Judas. So here's the question. It's not, are you going to waste something? It's you need to choose your waste. Choose your waste. Do you want to waste your life like Judas, or be viewed as wasting your life by the world by going all in for Jesus? And I don't know about you, but I would much rather be seen by going all in for Jesus and loving him with everything and being willing to pay whatever cost and have others think I'm wasting my life than actually waste my life by living for myself or living for comfort or convenience or pleasure or safety. See, the cost of saying no to Jesus is always greater than the cost of saying yes to Jesus. The cost of saying no to Jesus is always greater than the cost of saying yes to Jesus, and everybody's cost looks different. I don't know what that cost is that's standing in the way between you and where you are right now and living a with everything type of life for Jesus, but I promise you it's worth it. Judas is a tragic story of someone who didn't think Jesus was worth it. Don't be like that. I beg you. Like, come to the place even today, right now, where you say, I believe that Jesus is worthy of whatever it costs me, and I'm going to put the stake in the ground. I'm going to put my feet down right now, and I'm going to make a declaration that he is worthy of it all. He's worthy of my life, and I'm going all in. And I promise you, if you'll do that, you'll find that he's worth it. For some of you, I think you've been holding out on Jesus and not going all in because you're not sure if he's worth it. But I'm telling you, you don't fully discover that he's worth it until you declare it and go all in. I don't know what it's like to jump out of a plane because I've never done it. Why was she having the time of her life when she jumped out of that plane? Well, she wouldn't have had it if she wouldn't have jumped. Some of you today need to jump. You need to go all in. You need to stop hoping to one day or planning that next time or next year or one day I'll love Jesus with everything. You got to do it today. I heard a pastor once say, a decision to obey Jesus later is a decision not to obey him right now. A decision to say I'll love him later is a decision to say I'm not going to love him right now. And if he's worthy of it all, man, go all in. I love how Jesus said, and this is not on the screen, but in Matthew chapter 13, he's telling a parable about the kingdom of heaven. And he says, the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again. And then in his joy went and what? Sold all he had and bought that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and what? Sold everything he had and he bought it. What's Jesus saying? He's saying that he is the greatest treasure you could ever find, and he's worth whatever cost. Because what you gain with Jesus is way more than what it could ever cost you in this life. And it's what you were made for. I mean, think about that. It's what you were made for. You and I weren't made to partially follow Jesus. You and I were made to love him with everything as if he is the oxygen our lungs were created for. He who has Jesus, it's been said, and nothing else, has no less than he who has Jesus and everything the world has to offer. Because when you have Jesus, you have everything you could ever want or need. Jesus is worth the cost. When you realize that, you're willing to give whatever it is that he asks you. You're willing to live a with everything type of life for him. You're willing to do whatever he asks and go wherever he calls. You may be familiar with the story of Jim Elliot. If you're not, I'll tell it to you briefly. Jim Elliot, in the first part of the 1900s, seems like so long ago, right? He grew up. He was very smart. He had a bright future ahead of him. He was good at school, but he loved Jesus. And he felt like God was calling him to be a missionary to South America, Ecuador, to a remote village in Ecuador that had never heard about Jesus. And he knew that they were dangerous, and he knew that it wouldn't be easy to reach them for Jesus, but he knew that, man, it's what God had laid on his heart. So he forewent. He didn't go. He didn't do what others thought he should do. He didn't do what, he could have done anything with his life, been successful, all right? But he didn't do that. He went to Ecuador, to a remote tribe of people. And after being there for a little while and making contact and seeking to work with them, seeking to reach this tribe of people, they came for him and they killed him. He was 28 years old. Now, many people would look at that and say, why this waste? Like, Jim, man, you had a bright future. You could do anything. Man, let South America take care of itself. Like, let somebody else do that. But you've got a bright future, Jim. Like why this waste? Why did you do that, Jim? Like, man, that's so tragic. He's wasted his life, died so young. But you know what Jim Elliot wrote in his diary several years before? He wrote one of the most well-known phrases that has been associated with his life. And here's what he wrote down before he went to Ecuador. He said, "He is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep to gain that which he cannot lose." He is no fool who gives up what he cannot keep, his life, to gain that which he cannot lose, Jesus. Heaven, Jesus. Jim didn't waste his life, and Jim didn't lose. He had Jesus, and he was willing to pay whatever the cost. Let's not waste our life. Let's be so taken with the value of Jesus that we are willing to give up whatever it costs us to give up if there's something that's standing between us and loving him with everything. If that's what you were created for, if that's what I was created for, let's not let this life have a hold on us. So we're getting ready to sing a final song. And during this song, there may be some of you that are here, and you know this morning, you just need to make a declaration that Jesus is worth more than anything else. And I don't know what that is for each of you. It may be something that you need to give up that's sin, and you know it's sin, but you've been justifying it, but now you're shown, man, if Jesus is worth infinite value, then anything that goes against Jesus, I should give up and go all in for Jesus. Then I'm telling you, leave it behind this morning. It may not be a tangible thing. It may be you've just been kind of going through the motions, and you realize that the way that you've been loving Jesus isn't ascribing to him the value that he's actually worth. And you're like, okay, I'm tired of going halfway for Jesus. I'm ready to go all in. Or maybe you're here this morning and you've never put your faith in Jesus. You've never even crossed the line of faith to say, okay, I believe that I have sinned against him and I need to give him my life. It's not even about living for him. You just want to give him your life for the first time. Man, whatever that is, lay it down. Whatever it is, go all in. Whatever it is, love him with everything this morning. Don't hold back. Be willing to pay whatever the cost. because it's worth it. Every time someone pays any cost to go all in with Jesus, you can count yourself among the Marys whom Jesus looks at and says, that's a beautiful thing. Because loving him with everything is the most beautiful thing you could ever do with your life. So we're getting ready to sing. But if there's anyone that just needs to come, you can come here, kneel at these steps. We'll have leaders that'll be standing here at the front. They would love to pray with you. But can you just process right now? Just reflect and ask Jesus, is there anything that's standing between you and me? Is there any cost that I'm not willing to make? And if there is, do something about that right now.